Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. And my guest this week is Susan Peirce Thompson. Susan has a pretty intimate relationship with addiction, beginning in her teenage years with drugs, and then alcohol, and then sugar. But that all changed on August 9th, 1994, when she finally became sober and remains sober to this day. Susan is the founder of Bright Line Eating, and Bright Line Eating is changing thousands of lives, especially for sugar addicts. Now, not everyone listening to this podcast is a sugar addict to the extent that Susan is. In fact, I'm certainly not, but as you'll hear in this episode, there's a sliding scale of different types of relationships with sugar. So we'll get to our chat in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources about how to cut sugar, then I have plenty for you. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration. Pictures of meals, short reels, useful info to get you started on your life after sugar, as well as thought-provoking quotes and even sometimes pictures of our cat, so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. And if cravings are getting in the way and causing you to fall off the wagon, then I have 5 tips for you, especially if you're an intermittent faster, to help you get rid of cravings. Go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. You can also find my simple guide for getting more energy with less sugar by going to aftersugarclub.com, scrolling down to the bottom and clicking on Simple Guide. And while you're there at aftersugarclub.com, you can also have a look at the videos I've made for you to show you what to eat that doesn't contain added sugars, where to find real whole foods at the grocery store, and also how to look after your gut health, because cutting sugar is one of the best things you can do for your gut health. Go to aftersugarclub.com to get your free resources today. All right, here's my chat with Susan Peirce Thompson. So today I'm talking with Susan Peirce Thompson, PhD, who is the founder of Bright Line Eating, BLE, and who I've been following for years, actually. So I'm fangirling just a bit. Susan, can you tell us a little bit about your background with food, sugar, addiction, and Bright Line Eating?
Oh, sure, Netta. Yeah, wow, big question. All right, so I got to take you all the way back. I started using drugs as a teenager and, just fun and experimentation at first, but I got really hooked. And the drugs got worse and worse and worse. I mean, I started with pot and alcohol and psychedelics, and then I progressed to crystal meth, which by the time I picked up speed or crystal meth, I was 16 and I was very concerned about my weight already. And speed was just brilliant because I didn't have to eat really on it. And I lost a lot of weight, but I also developed quite a bit of psychosis and had to drop out of high school. And I quit speed after a couple of years but then found cocaine and started freebasing cocaine, and then started smoking crack and prostitution. And that was the state that I was in when I got clean and sober when I was 20. So I haven't had a drink or a drug in 28 years. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. You've been sober longer than you were addicted to drugs, is that right?
Oh my gosh, like almost 5 times longer. Yeah. I mean, I drank and used for 6 years, really almost exactly from the summer before freshman year of high school, the summer that I turned 14 to the summer that I turned 20. Exactly 6 years was the span of my drug addiction. I hit it hard and fast and just blazed out quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, now I've been clean and sober 28, almost 29 years. So way longer, you know.
Amazing. Yes. And that age range that you just gave, my daughter's just turned 15, and I am freaking out thinking that could be her. And you've got 3 daughters, right?
I've got 3 kiddos, and 2 of them, the twins, are about to turn 15 in like a couple weeks here. Yeah. I think I did the math wrong, by the way. It's like almost 5 times longer. Whatever. Anyway, a lot longer. Yeah, I think the same thing. And I also think how much, I mean, it's not that my kids are immature, but I was 15 going on 40. I mean, I was really worldly at 15. I started riding the city buses of San Francisco around the city when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. Like I had a bus pass and I just had the rate of the city. My mom worked in Fisherman's Wharf all summer, and, I had a bus pass and I just went places. And, I just grew up really fast. So yeah, my 15-year-olds are not anywhere near kind of living the life that I was then. And thank God, thank God.
Well, bravo to you, Mom.
Yeah. So I got clean and sober, but then I gained weight really fast, and I was prepared to put on a ton of weight. I knew that when I stopped smoking crack every day that I was going to gain a lot of weight. And at first I didn't care because I was just so grateful to be out of the hell of the addiction that I had been living in. But within 9 months and about 40 pounds, I started to really care. And I was, 20 years old. And I was talking in my 12-step meetings for drugs and alcohol all about the food I was eating. I just kept talking about my food because my eating was out of control. And people poo-pooed me, and then they sent me to food meetings. They're like, there's other meetings for that, And so I started going to other meetings. And Netta, that started years of a merry-go-round with 12-step food meetings because there's so many different programs. And I did not find lasting success there for the most part. I found intermittent success. And overall, I just kept gaining weight. And that said, that part of my life was marked also by a lot of flourishing and success in a lot of ways, because I was going to a lot of meetings, I was working the steps, and I was crushing it at school. I had always been good at school as a kid, and I loved school. And I started studying the mind and the brain, which I'm really into. I geek out on the mind and the brain. And so
I noticed.
yeah. And so I went to community college in California. 3 cheers for the community college system.
Yeah, that's what I teach in.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
And I did too. As a professor later on, teaching in community college was incredible because I got to develop, the psychology of eating and positive psychology courses that when I was at a more prestigious, hoity-toity university, I was very pigeonholed as a cognitive developmental neuroscientist, right? Like a very narrow little slice of academia. And, other than maybe a course like research methods, I wasn't going to be able to teach, other things. And so at community college, I developed these courses, the psychology of eating and positive psychology, both of which very much laid the framework for what I ended up developing in Bright Line Eating. So the bridge from there to there is that, my food was a mess. I tried 12-step everything. Finally, I did find, like the right configuration of what to do with my food. I lost my excess weight. That was 19 years ago. So at that point, I was living with clinical obesity. So I've been slender now for 19 years. And, and I learned the miracle of not eating sugar and not eating flour and really treating my food like I treated my booze. Like I just don't engage with those foods. And my life got so much better after that. And so,
Can I just interrupt you a second and ask you, because I have no experience myself with 12-step programs, although, I'm aware of what they are. When you were in the 12-step program, or when you were experiencing like the intermittent success, as it were, did anyone or yourself ever come up with the sort of the explanation of, wait, it's not all food, it's certain types of foods, including sugar and flour?
Yeah, there was some of that, and programs differ. There's about 8 12-step programs with significant membership that I'm aware of today. And the one I was in, Overeaters Anonymous at the time, well, still, is the biggest first one. And Overeaters Anonymous abandoned advocating or promoting specific food plan guidance a long time ago, when they tried to get some nutritionists in to sort of come to some agreement, and they couldn't. And OA decided, well, what business do we have advocating specific food plans when the experts can't even agree? We better just leave everyone to abstain from the foods and eating behaviors that cause them difficulty and just leave it to them. But unfortunately, when an addict is left to decide if they want to use or not, guess what they choose, right? And so in OA, when I was in it for all those years, there was a lot of experimentation and exploration, and people who would eat this artificial sweetener, but not that one, eat honey, but not white sugar, eat brown flour, but not white flour. And there was so much messing around the margin. Like when I look back at some of my old food journals, then, I was committing mac and cheese and an apple for lunch. And I was having yogurt with fruit on the bottom. And I was, maybe it was sweetened with aspartame or something. And I was, having barbecue sauce on my chicken. And I was, I thought that I wasn't eating sugar, but really, I just didn't have any kind of clarity around sugar and flour. There was one woman in my meetings, once I moved to Rochester and started my PhD program, who didn't eat sugar, didn't eat flour, and weighed and measured her food. And sure enough, she was the thinnest, sanest one in the room. But I didn't really want what she had. She was also different in some other ways that I wasn't attracted to her personality wise, Anyway, so there was some, but not much, a lot of the blind leading the blind.
It feels like, like you're a lone voice, or one of a few voices. I'd like to be in the same group as you, that say, look, that have drawn these bright lines to say, it's not some, it's not a little, it's none.
Yeah. And that's a saying that someone in my Bright Lifers community came up with, which I love, which is none is easier than some.
It's the case for me, and I don't even consider I'm a sugar addict or a food addict. But none, I say, for some of us, 0 is freedom.
Yeah, that's right. And, we can talk about moderation, right? Which I think is also an interesting idea, because just the very notion of moderation requires consideration of the entities involved, right? Like the moderate amount of cyanide for a human being is none, right? And so, I don't even consider it to be immoderate to not eat any sugar or flour. It's absolutely the moderate thing for me to do. It's, if I look at the sort of fruits of the tree of moderation, right? Things like balance and poise and equanimity and well-being and emotional sobriety and that sort of thing, like no sugar, no flour for me is complete moderation,
Yeah, I get it. I know people have said to me, it's so extreme, you need a balanced diet. I'm like, I'm balancing just fine. Thank you.
Well, that sounds also like the person who says it's not reasonable or sane to eliminate all food groups from your diet, to which, of course, the reply is, since when did sugar become a food group?
Exactly.
What has happened to our nutritional conceptions that sugar is now a food group? Yeah. And oh, by the way, are you saying that to the vegetarian down the road who actually has eliminated a food group and is also doing just fine, right?
Let alone the idea of splitting foods up into random groups anyway.
Well, yeah, very good point. I mean, in Bright Line Eating, we eat all whole, real foods. We eat all fruits, all vegetables, all proteins, all legumes, all nuts, all seeds. We eat, I mean, like you can't point out a food that we don't eat, right?
Yeah.
The only things we don't eat are industrial, byproduct,
Yeah, that we don't even grace with the word food anyway.
yeah. Well, yeah, you and I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, you
So,
and I don't. I think there's a couple more people that don't.
yep. Yep.
Which brings me to something I wanted to mention to you, which is I saw a recent vlog of yours talking about the Nova scale, which, and when I first heard about the Nova scale, it was like when I first heard about keto, I was like, yes, someone's understood. And then very shortly after, I toppled down and thought, oh, no, that's not what it's all about. It's been twisted out of proportion. So like the Nova scale, speaking about random groups, it has kind of divided groups into different, or divided food rather, into different groups depending on their level of processing, right?
Right.
And I like that you picked a few holes in that type of division of foods. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So, right. So the whole point of the NOVA classification scale, and I don't know if it's an acronym, I haven't heard what it stands for, but it's capital NOVA, right?
Yeah.
And
doesn't it mean new or something, but maybe not in Spanish?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it also Nova also means doesn't go in Spanish, which is why it wasn't a good name for a car when they took the Chevy Nova and put it down into South America. They're like, this car doesn't go. That's not good.
Yep.
So yeah. So researchers in Brazil came up with this in, I think, 2009, and the concept is fabulous. I mean, it really is. We do need some way to be talking and not just talking, but operationalizing the distinction between foods in terms of how processed they are, especially, and this was the best contribution of the NOVA scale, this fourth category of ultra processed foods. And this notion of an ultra processed food, meaning a food that's not even made up of food ingredients, but that's made up of industrial ingredients, right? Like chemicals and industrial extracts that might have at some point come from food and might have just been chemically concocted, right? In a factory, mixed together, poured into a bag or a box, right? Ultra processed foods, which research shows comprise 2/3 of the calories that our kids and adolescents are currently eating, and something like 58% of the calories that your average adult is eating. Like, we're mostly eating processed foods now, right? So that's a fabulous thing. That's the fourth and highest level of processing. But the idea of the NOVA scale is you're supposed to start with like not processed food, level 1, not processed or minimally processed, presumably my ground flax seeds that I take whole flaxseed and put them in a coffee grinder and grind them a little bit so that my body can absorb them. Like, that's a level 1 food, right? Or you take a banana, you peel the banana, you eat the inside of it, minimally processed, right? Like, you're just, eating a banana. Okay. So level 1, right? But then the devil's in the details. Levels 2 and 3. Level 2 is culinary ingredients, but they put white sugar and white flour into level 2. So right there, we're off track, right? White sugar and white flour are level 4 foods, right? Yeah. So those are level 2 foods. And then level 3 is supposed to be combinations of level 1 and 2 foods. But that means that they're putting, canned green beans, which have salt, which is a level 2 ingredient, and green beans, which are level 1, right? They're putting those in level 3. They're putting just a can of green beans. Yeah. Plain unadulterated can of green beans is a level 3 food, whereas white sugar is a level 2 food. So it's just already we're so off track, where like grape jelly, like Smucker's grape jelly, like completely, that's also a level 3 food. And so the study that I talked about in the vlog that I recently put out was brilliantly done. It was by a bunch of French researchers who took a bunch of French dietitians and food experts and, health experts, medical professionals and so forth, like experts, in other words, not lay people, gave them lists of foods. One list had no ingredient information. It just described the food. And then the other list actually had the nutrition information, the ingredients, the nutrition table, everything. and said, put these foods into the NOVA classification groups. And they found that nobody was agreeing. And so a classification system with very low inter-rater reliability, where one person doesn't agree with another person's classification, is a useless system, essentially. And they pointed out that certain foods were especially problematic. I mean, some foods were easy, right? Everyone got that apples are level 1, and that, I don't know what, Pop-Tarts or something are level 4. But there were a lot of foods that had almost no agreement whatsoever, like plain yogurt, where if you read the whole NOVA description, plain yogurt is supposed to be level 1, but then, oh, by the way, the fermentation process that makes plain yogurt is a level 4 process. And then also, lactose, or level 3 process, sorry. And then lactose and casein and ingredients like that are level 4 ingredients. So people were putting, plain dairy products all over the map into different categories for good reasons.
Yeah.
So it's just not a helpful scale, unfortunately, but we do need something like that.
We do need something like that. I mean, it's good as a jumping off point for developing something, that maybe for us consumers that could be slightly less complex, even that, 4 levels, it gets more complex because food is not, again, food is, in my humble opinion, not out there, not naturally divided into random groups. I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews. And when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In Bright Line Eating, we put a lot of stock into our categories of food: fruit, vegetable, protein, grain, fat. And some of it's pretty contrived, right? Like, why are potatoes a grain? Well, because they're just starchier, right? I don't want people eating a bunch of potatoes for their vegetable.
Gotcha.
And yet I had to draw the line somewhere. So butternut squash actually does count as a vegetable, right? And, tomato and cucumbers are fruits, technically, biologically, right? But I count them as vegetables because I think they have more in common with vegetables, nutritionally speaking, than with apples and bananas and pineapple. But yeah, there's some amount of arbitrariness to it all. I mean, I think a biologist might disagree with you, might think that foods do come categorized, right?
Good. Well, I'm happy for people to disagree. Yeah, totally. And it's a bit like, I don't know, time and space and these are things that humans have invented to try and make sense of the world. And, it's fine to have the groups. I'm just saying that sometimes, I don't know whether food addicts do this more than anyone else, but sometimes we get caught up in the groups and the categories and rather than the sort of underlying simplicity of it all, which is, I think, your message, my message, is eat real food. And then we get into the weeds of, but what is real food?
Yeah. Well, there's a great saying in science, which I love, which is, all models are wrong, but some are useful. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And so, when I was floundering for years, not a short amount of time after I got clean and sober, it was 9 years later that I, lost my weight and solved this food issue. Solved is a strong word. I still, grapple, but, pretty much solved. Anyway, when I came upon the like no sugar, no flour, 3 meals a day, commit, write down your food the night before, eat only in exactly that. When I came upon that model, it might be wrong. The categories of food that I use might be, wrong, whatever, but it's so useful. Like as soon as I adopted that way of eating, I got so free so fast, and my weight came off like just melting off. Like I had been struggling to lose that weight. I've been running marathons and doing diets and nothing was working. So I just find that this way of looking at food is useful.
Yeah, yeah, totally get that. And it's almost like the diets and the rules and everything are stop us, prevent us as individuals asking ourselves what works for me,
Yeah.
because what you just described would be like my worst nightmare of being told what to do. Like I can see that it's totally freeing for hundreds of thousands of people that you help to write down the night before and to measure and weigh their food and all the rest of it. That I know is totally freeing for certain people. It's a nightmare for me, and it would be a nightmare for you to have me in bright line eating, because I would just rebel against everything.
Yeah.
You don't want someone like me in your group.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that. Bright line eating isn't for everybody, it's for people, it's not even for the people who need it. It's for the people who want it and are willing to work it, right?
And I say the same about life after sugar. It's I didn't want it. Did you want to give up sugar and flour? Did you want to?
No,
Yeah.
I did not until I did.
Yeah.
Until I did. When I finally heard about it when I was 28 in a different context, I was like, oh yeah, I need that. And at that point I did. I had banged my head against that brick wall and gotten a bloody skull enough that I was like, oh yeah, I want that. I wanted it badly.
It's like I don't want the thing, the giving up the sugar and the flour and the whatnot, but I want what it gives me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, that's what it was. It was like, no way, I resist it. Oh, no way am I giving up chocolate and all the rest of it. But once I experienced what the absence of sugar and flour and sweeteners gave me, I was like, I want more of this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to come back to the thing you were saying about yogurt, because I don't know if you know, but I'm a bit of a fermenter, home fermenter. And in Life After Sugar, I teach people how to make their own yogurt, mesophilic yogurt, that you don't need a yogurt maker or any fancy paraphernalia. You just leave it on the counter, and it's what we call, it's a villi culture, like a mesophilic culture that cultures at room temperature. I teach them how to make milk kefir, kombucha, water kefir. Now my hubby has jumped on the bandwagon and makes our sauerkraut, and I make kimchi, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I started making when I first cut sugar and flour because of my digestion. It was really for my digestion that I did it more than for weight loss. And so what you were saying about yogurt, like it on paper, all these fermented foods are processed, right?
Right.
Not by the industry, but by the good bacteria that do all the work for us.
Right.
And so it's like,
interesting thing, but they're so healthy. I mean, I eat tempeh every day. I make a homemade Greek soy yogurt. That's delicious. I start every morning with that. I love fermented foods. And it's a good point. They're processed, but I mean, tofu is processed, and tempeh, it's got to be one of the healthiest foods you can eat in the whole world is tempeh, and like processed.
The tempeh is fermented, whereas tofu isn't. But
right.
But
they're both processed, right? And
processed.
But this is where the NOVA classification system, or any system, is going to come into challenges, because like there's healthy processing, I guess, and unhealthy processing, and there's just a big difference between tempeh and white sugar, right?
Yeah. And the fact, sometimes I tell people, the fact that you do it at home, the geographical location of the processing it doesn't count as much as what that processing is. So if they're making like homemade muffins or cookies, then the fact that it's made at home makes no difference to the biological, biologically what the flour and the sugar does to your body.
Totally. That old like joke of like, you can have locally sourced, organic, gluten-free crack, and it's still crack cocaine,
Yeah. And you can cut it up and grind it up or whatever you do. Sorry, my complete ignorance about hard drugs, but you can do that at home and your body doesn't care. Yeah. So, can I ask you, I'm sure you've said this a million times before, but can I ask you, do you identify yourself even today as a food addict?
Absolutely. It's my identity as an addict, holistically speaking, an addict is probably my core identity.
Okay.
More than even, I don't know about like a woman or whatever, an American, or, I am an addict, and food addict for sure. And I love that identity. I feel like it serves me because my recovery is my primary identity. This journey that I've been on since I was 20 years old of recovery that associates me with my sense of the divine in the world, with a community of people I'm traveling with a way that I know that I can think if I'm off the beam, and a way that I know that I can thrive if I'm, working my recovery program. All of that kind of comes from this dual identity of addict in recovery. And it's so empowering for me. So I know it's disempowering for others. And I am very vocal about choose words that work for you. This framing works for me for sure.
Fantastic. It's like find what suits you, what fits you. Yeah. And wear it with pride,
And one of the things I'm very proud to have brought to the world publicly, vocally, is this notion of the susceptibility scale, that addiction is not binary. In all the 12-step rooms I've ever been in, they talk about addiction as a binary thing. Well, are you a food addict or aren't you? And it's like, well, I have a scale from 1 to 10. And, what does that question even do to someone who's a 6 on that scale? Right? It's like, well, I'm enough of an addict that that I lose control over how much sugar I eat sometimes, and it's getting in the way of me losing my weight. But I certainly don't binge like those food addicts over there do. And I've got some amount of addiction on board. And I think it's really important to understand that continuum, and then to empower people to understand where they are on the continuum, and that they're going to have to find a way to work a recovery program that's potent enough for the level of addiction that they have on board.
Yeah. And I think I myself used to be around a 6, and I'm probably like a 2 or something now, in the sense that I don't know if you can move it. I mean, you can do whatever you like, I suppose, but I don't know where. I haven't taken this, for a while. Because
let me answer that question. Yeah. So yes, you're living right now as a 2. I am as well, by the way. I'm about a 2-ish on the scale now in terms of how I live. But the quiz, the food addiction susceptibility quiz, starts off by saying, remember a time in your life, call to mind a time in your life when your eating was at its worst. Not a day, but like a stretch of time when your eating was at its worst, and take the quiz from that perspective. From that vantage point, you're still a 6 and I'm still a 10 plus plus. But that's not to say you'll always be sick with these symptoms. It's to say you will always have to be more vigilant than someone who never had a food problem. Meaning, if you started eating sugar and flour again by the handful, you probably would go very quickly back to being a 6, right?
100%. I'm convinced of it. And for the first while, I've been sugar, flour, and sweetener free for almost 8 years now. And for the first while, which I consider like the first 5 years, is like the beginning, It was like I was scared. I was deathly afraid of, even touching a bit of sugar or flour, which I've sort of relaxed a bit now about. But it's like, because I had this I imagined this slippery slope, immediately happening to me. And even though I wasn't a 10, a 6 for me was, 4 points higher than I wanted to be.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. And
Yeah. And
so
now you don't live with that fear.
no,
You're
I'm working in my 50s now at letting go of all kinds of fears of that,
yeah,
of which that one. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't want to have fear in my life.
Yeah. And it's an interesting fear, right? Like uh maybe we don't call it fear, maybe we call it respect, right? The way you respect a cliff, like you don't, like I'm not scared of the cliff. It's over there, but I'm not going to walk up and put my tippy toes over the edge of it and look over. So it's more like that. Like, what do they call it? Healthy fear or something? It's sort of like I have respect for the power of this thing, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, kick the tiger and, bite his ear.
Yeah, yeah, the red dog, whatever. Yes, there's all sorts of animals that come into the equation.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. It's like self-knowledge for me, self-respect as well. And it's like, well, who do I want to be and what do I want? How do I want to live my life?
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. I was talking with someone recently who always identified it as a food addict, and she's started eating sugar and flour again, and she's in a different 12-step program for food that enables and supports her to eat every different food, and she's spending a lot of time, considering, my brain is telling me it wants me to eat this cookie or that thing, or, what's my motive? Am I really hungry? She's really doing sort of an intuitive eating kind of thing. And I ran that experiment in 2012. It didn't work for me, but as I was talking with her about it, it reminded me how much today I don't want to have to bother with
Yeah.
that. Right. I don't want to have to think about what my motives are
Yeah.
about eating, or like think about whether I'm hungry or not. I really love getting to mealtime and like going, oh, look, it's lunchtime, and then kind of knowing what I'm going to eat and then just eating it. I mean, I got 3 kids and 17 employees, and I got a lot of life to fit into my 24 hours. And thinking about my food is like really low on my list. And so that said, I want to make it very clear that I am not making light of her choice to do that, nor do I think that she's making a misguided or wrong choice for her. I think that I remember when, for me, that was exactly the experiment that I needed to be running. And I'm not even saying it's an experiment for her. It might be her, like, she says she's happier and feels more self-actualized and feels freer. And I believe her, and, power to her. So, it's interesting because I hold space for like this very we put our stick in the ground kind of movement for bright line eating, and I am so not, like a militant person that everybody should be doing this, and anyone who's not is kidding themselves. I don't think that at all.
No, I know. I mean, I never thought you did, but I can see how some people can think that that anyone who has a strong opinion, I'm not even saying any woman, I didn't say that has a strong opinion, is like, yeah, we're talking about ourselves as individuals, and like the message that I get from you and that I send as well, or hopefully is received, is I think there's not enough happy people on this planet, and one more doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
what you were saying about intuitive eating, and this automaticity that you have now with your food, I have it in a different way. But what I found with intuitive eating is that it's pretty much impossible when you're eating those crave-worthy industrial foods with sugar and flour. Those foods, sugar and flour, hijacks, in my experience, your ability to be an intuitive eater.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably the experience for anyone who's moderate or high on the food addiction susceptibility scale. I think it's not true probably for people who are low on the food addiction susceptibility scale, but maybe it is for some of them, maybe it is for some of them that, and this is where to thine own self be true,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes, we say our message and the reactions that come back, what people reflect back to us, you're like, but I didn't say that,
Yeah, totally.
And we don't even say to people, don't eat sugar and flour and sweetness. We're like, well, but that's what is often received. Or even if we'd say, this is what sugar, flour, and sweeteners are likely to do to your system, your brain, your insulin, your body. And it's like after that, if you can handle it, decide for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, lovely. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. How can people get in touch with you or with Bright Line Eating?
Oh, it's so easy. Brightlineeating.com. BRIGHTLINEEATING, brightlineeating.com. And scroll down to the bottom, the very bottom of that page, you'll find the quiz. And that quiz is really helpful on a scale from 1 to 10. It's good to know where you are.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, I've done it several times. And it's a quiz not just about food addiction, but it really helps you to discover more about yourself, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Care about your food and your relationship to it. It's a good number to know.
Definitely.
Very informative.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, I hope you learned a lot from Susan, because she is like my yardstick for all things sugar addiction. And again, even though I don't personally identify as a sugar addict, she does, and you may too. And there's absolutely no shame in that. In fact, even a sugar addict can find freedom. For Susan, this means following the 4 bright lines of Bright Line Eating. And for others, like myself, this may not work. It's all good. There's plenty of room for everybody. And as I always say, there are as many ways of becoming sugar-free as there are people. And if Susan's Bright Line Eating seems like a good fit for you, then check it out. I put her link along with this episode. And if you know that you need to cut sugar, but you need guidance and not quite as many rules as Bright Line Eating, then the After Sugar Club is for you. And if you want to be with other like-minded people, then join us in the After Sugar Club. When you sign up, you'll get all the support, the accountability, and the guidance you need to break free from the diet culture, as well as from the emotional dependency that you have on sugar. Go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to see everything that's included in the After Sugar Club and in the Premium After Sugar Club, where you'll get much more personalized and customized guidance and feedback to help you on your journey to breaking free from sugar. Plus, you get a whole year for free in the After Sugar Club when you sign up for the premium option. Go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to join us. Thank you for listening. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.